So I'll keep watching, Chris, for others to join us,
Yep.
but it is 3 o'clock. No, it's 3:03. And for those that don't know me, I'm Tammy Ford and I'm with the Blunt Partnership, and I try to start on time and I end on time. So thanks for joining us today. I was amazed to see how many people were joining us, but then thinking of the topic. So two things I were thinking was everybody's trying to figure this out, this forgiveness piece. So that's one. And the other is maybe you're at home and you don't have anything else to do. So you just wanted to join in and see us today. Everyone is on mute, and let's keep it on mute because there's just so many. We've got 80 plus signed up. What we're going to do is in a moment, I'm going to turn it over to Chris Trump, and he's going to walk us through all the wonderful things that we need to know about being forgiven. That sounds so funny. Yes, about being forgiven. And it's going to be simple, and we may come back because Chris will tell you in a bit that there's more guidelines to come. Goodness gracious, that's all I hear is there's more things coming. There's another guideline coming. So we'll keep you posted as things develop. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn it over to Chris in a moment. He's going to do a few slides, and then I'm just going to keep a watch on chat. And so instead of voicing your question, you can type it in chat. I will read the question because we're also recording this. So if you want to come back later to watch it, then you can. If you missed something, I'll read the question and we'll move on. Most of the questions going to be safe for the last 30 minutes because what I have found in the past 4 weeks is everybody has a unique circumstance, and they, you know, your question may be the same as the next one, but there's this little caveat as part of it. So we've saved plenty of time at the end for us to have Q&A. So let me admit a few more people. And we've got one more in waiting. Okay. So this is the second Zoominar. I don't know if that's a word, but it's my word. This is I've done several of them, so I'm starting to get, I wouldn't say proficient, but much better at them. Chris Trump is with us today. I never can say his company name right. It's
Edgerton McAfee.
Thank you, Chris. It's always right here, and I always feel like I'm getting ready to mispronounce it. And I'm glad about the firm, but I'm more glad that you're with us today and bringing your expertise. So, Chris, thank you, and I turn it over to you.
Well, glad to be here. Thank you, Tammy. I appreciate it. I'm going to go ahead and bring up a PowerPoint presentation. But as Tammy said, I'm with Edgerton McAfee. We're a business firm in the area, and I personally have been involved in quite a bit in various. Let me just share my screen here real quick. Hold on. I've been involved in commercial lending transactions, business lending for quite a long time, most of my career, and so as this Paycheck Protection Program came about, it became very critical to all of our clients and all of you guys as well. This program is designed primarily for folks who either have already received or have already been earmarked to receive Paycheck Protection Program loan, or perhaps in the queue to be approved. And I'll say this right now, it should be today actually. The Senate passed a bill last night, but today the House was slated to take up a bill to allocate about $310 billion more to this program. The program is currently, they ran out of money. Initially, it was $349 billion that was allocated, and there has been there was a run on it, obviously. A lot of controversy as to who was able to get loans and who wasn't, and that kind of stuff the first round. And so the administration pushed to get additional funding, and through the Democrats and Republican worked out a deal to allocate another $310 billion, funds for this. Now, just to give you a little bit of context, so one of the things that they want to make, Democrats want to make sure they got into this bill was that all the large banks didn't just suck it all up like they felt like they did the first time around. And so there are some earmarks here that basically forces the SBA to use smaller banks for a significant portion, really about $60 billion worth of the loans have to go either to smaller kind of like mid-market banks or small community banks. And so that was one of the things that they accomplished through the program to make it a little bit different. But generally speaking, there was some hope that perhaps there would be some technical amendments to the original CARES Act, but that did not come through. All they really did is just add some more money to it. So we're stuck with what we have. And what we have in many instances is not a lot of guidance and structure as to how to accomplish some things. And loan forgiveness is one of those areas in particular that the guidance is still forthcoming. Very little given to us at this point. So we're all kind of fumbling in the dark. The folks who have already received their loan proceeds, they're already in that 8-week period post loan that they have to try and figure out what to do with the loan proceeds to ensure they get forgiveness. And so it is definitely kind of a time where folks are trying to do the best they can. And that's about all we can do today. There's the CARES Act has language in here, but the SBA has made it very clear in some interim rules they've issued already that additional guidance is coming on forgiveness. It's unfortunately it hasn't come out yet. So I have a little PowerPoint presentation I'll kind of run through. I see, I still have not shared my screen yet. I don't think, here we go. And so I will hit some of the basics here. And as you have questions, again, please use the chat box, the chat feature to go ahead and ask those questions, submit them to Tammy. She can present. Go ahead.
Let me just ask, I had someone ask about being able to see your presentation. So if you can't see Chris's presentation, I've got an email or a message from Lisa. Lisa, can you give me a thumbs up somewhere that you can see it? And if there's others that can't, please let me know.
All right. So just again, some context here. You've have heard ad nauseum at this point about the CARES Act and the Paycheck Protection Program. Is in essence, just to give a little context, there's an existing, this is an expansion of an existing loan program that the SBA has had in place for years. They're called Section 7A loans, business loans. And so the CARES Act essentially expanded the eligibility of those loans, created a sub loan, a separate category of loans under the 7A loans. And some of the features are the loan amount is established at 2.5 times your monthly payroll costs. The SBA is guaranteeing 100% of these loans. The loans are made directly from the participating banks, though. The SBA just guarantees the full payment of those to the banks so that it can streamline the processing. There was a lot of hiccups and stuff associated with it being rolled out so quickly, but in the end, they were able to loan, all the banks in America were able to loan $350 billion worth of loans in roughly about 2 to 3 weeks. So it was quite a monumentous, undertaking, and they accomplishment. The loans do provide for a 6 to 12 month. It's basically going to be a 6-month deferral period. And the biggest, feature of this, which is the point of this program, is that all or portion of the loan that you receive is able to be forgiven, so that you don't actually have to pay that amount back. In essence, the SBA pays the banks that repays the loan instead of you, as long as you use the loan proceeds as they want. So that's the kind of the principal feature. Here's a couple of things. I will send this PowerPoint presentation out to you guys, but there's a couple of links here that I think are helpful. There's an interim final rule that was issued back on April the 2nd and then revised a little bit. And then there's another rule related to primarily self-employed individuals and some stuff to the banks, the resale of these loans on the secondary market. And so I've got a link here for you, and then the application itself is there. I will just say, on as far as, getting the loans, go ahead and find a participating lender quickly. If you have not received one yet and want to get in line, there are people that have applied ahead of you. So it's very important that you get your application in as soon as possible. Your best to start with the bank that you currently bank with, assuming they are a participant. Most banks have been kind of giving their current customers priority in this regard. And so if you have a bank that's participating that you have a relationship with, please go ahead and start that process if you have not already. If not, feel free to shoot Tammy and myself an email, and we can help guide you to some banks that are still taking applications. I have a few that I've been sending people to that still are doing so. And Tammy, I think that you're aware of some folks as well, particularly in the Blount County area. So anyway, just wanted to kind of let you know. So I'm not going to give the details as to who's eligible at this point, but I did want to put this in here just in case you're still looking at whether you should apply or not. But basically, if you have fewer than 500 employees, generally speaking, you're going to be eligible for the loan. If you have fewer than 500 employees and we're in business on February 15th, 2020. So the Paycheck Protection Program makes it very clear on what you're allowed to use the loan proceeds for. Okay. The buzzword of the day is payroll costs. And that's a defined term we'll talk about in just a second. But ultimately, payroll costs are, I'll get into detail in just a minute, but basically what it comes down to is you can use it for payroll. You can use it for kind of, other costs associated with like benefits and such, interest payments, and rents on leases and utilities. So those are the categories of what you're allowed to use loan proceeds for. Those are important because not only are you required to, so when you receive the loan, you must use those loan proceeds between the time you receive it and June 30th on these list of items. Okay. However, there's another timeline you have to take into consideration and for forgiveness purposes, and that is the 8 weeks right after your loan. So the 8 weeks goes over the June 30th. It's okay, essentially, but basically you have to use loan proceeds for these purposes. Okay, and now we'll talk about that in just a second here. The key factor here is, and this is not only just in terms of for forgiveness purposes, but it's also just it's a theme that goes along through the entire loan program. And that is, of your loan proceeds, you have to use 75% towards payroll costs. And so that is really important, okay? Because to the extent you drop below that 75%, you're going to have to repay those loan proceeds, okay? The big couple things to keep in mind there is that you got to repay it to the extent you don't use it as required, okay? And you have to make sure you don't knowingly use it for improper purposes. So if you're using it for something other than what's listed, you could be personally liable for it, not just your company. And so keep that in mind. Basically what we're telling folks is, the safe play here is don't use your loan proceeds for anything other than payroll costs until you hit that 75% threshold, or you're going to hit that 75% threshold. And the other way, it's really important to really carefully track the use of your proceeds so that you comply with the requirements as to how you're using the proceeds. Most folks are recommending a separate bank account, generally with the bank that gives you the loan, typically is what happens. And so that bank account can be used to make disbursements out of the loan proceeds for specifically allowed, expenditures. Again, safe play. Do not use the loan proceeds for anything other than payroll costs till you hit that 75% threshold, or know you're going to hit it for the time period. Basically what it comes down to, only 25% can be used for rent, mortgage interest, and utilities. So you just want to make sure that you hit that 75% threshold and you have a plan to do so.
Can we there?
Yeah.
Okay. So obviously we've got several questions. Here's one. We conducted performance reviews here between 18 and 25 people, I think that's what they meant, and told them that they were going to get certain bonuses, but did not actually pay them yet. Can we pay them out of the PPP funds since they were awarded before the act?
So let's in just a moment we'll talk about forgiveness, okay? But and that is one of the biggest questions right now that is kind of unknown, okay? And that is how much can you pay folks outside of the norm in terms of forgiveness? So the answer to that is just really unknown right now. So if you have already established a bonus that you just have not paid yet, then I personally feel like that would be absolutely permissible to be paid during that 8-week period after receiving the loan. Now, there may be guidance saying something to the contrary. I don't think so. I think if you look at the purpose of the Payroll Protection Program, it is to make sure that you get money in the hands of employees, money that they would be entitled to receive. So if you were trying to if you're trying to kind of accelerate payment that would be otherwise due or maybe not earned yet or whatever, I would have a little more question about that. But but in this particular instance where you've already established a bonus that they're entitled to pay to receive, then I have no problems encouraging you to go ahead and pay that during that week period.
Okay, so Chrissy, the question was clarified. So there was a bonus, and it was bonuses that were verbally given between March 18th and the 25th, and so they were getting those bonuses, but they had not paid them yet. And I think that changes the
I guess
structure.
same answer. I think I do believe that was the case, and that was really I think the 18th actually. I don't think that the CARES Act had even been passed at that point. So I mean from my perspective, I don't feel too much of a problem, particularly if you've got it's based on evaluations, and this would be a bonus you would typically give. I feel like that would be very comfortable with that. So go ahead.
Do you want more questions, or
Yeah, go ahead. We do need to cover what payroll costs include, but go ahead.
Okay. Do you think employee provided disability insurance will be included?
So it is not specifically mentioned. It is health care benefits. Disability insurance is not specifically mentioned. I don't. I would play it safe on those if it were me, because if you use it for the wrong purpose, you'll have to pay it back. I mean, worst case scenario, you have to pay it back, right? So if you've used it for that purpose, then you have funds in the future that can pay it back. It's not that big of a deal. But I'm encouraging folks to be a little bit more conservative on those things. The things that are very clear, which is right here: payments of vacation, parental, family, medical, sick leave, allowance for dismissal or separation. So like any type of severance payments you're giving folks that you laid off at any point, payments required for the provision of group health care benefits, including health insurance premiums. And again, that's the one that you might be able to argue disability is included. We have not, like some of the folks that I've talked to, most have not gone that far and included those things. Payment of retirement benefits. So the employer's contribution to 401k would be included in that. And the payment of state and local tax assessments on employee compensation. That's important because if you look at what's excluded right here, the federal payroll taxes, so the employer's portion of the federal payroll taxes would not be included here. Okay. So only the state unemployment and other payroll related state and local taxes would be included. One thing that I think is probably clear to most folks by now, but amounts paid to independent contractors is not considered a payroll cost. Okay. And the reason for that is because independent contractors can apply for the loan themselves. And so anyway, here's another one too that's come up a few times. Any compensation of an employee whose principal place of residence is outside the United States, that's not included in term payroll costs. And then so actually, there you go. And then qualified sick leave or family leave wages for which a credit is allowed under the Families First. That was the whole expanded sick leave in FMLA. Those amounts are not included because you get certain tax credits for payment of those amounts. So that would not be included. So again, the disability insurance is not specifically excluded, but what we have done, I'll tell you where we do see it and include it is if it is something that you pay on behalf of the employee and you're taking it out of their pay. So like life insurance proceeds, sometimes group life insurance proceeds come out of their pay. Those amounts can be you get basically their gross wages, so you don't deduct that in determining what the payroll costs for that particular employee. So hopefully that's a little bit helpful. Again, the big key here is to the extent you use the loan proceeds for these purposes in 75% during the 8-week period following the day the loan is made. That's what they've come up with is the date the loan is made. Then you will receive loan forgiveness. A couple important facts here is that it's a maximum of $15,385 per individual employee. Okay. And then on the self-employment part, the owner compensation replacement is capped at 8/52 of their 2019 net profit. That's assuming you were around for the entire year 2019. This is pulled right off of Schedule C from your tax return. And so the key here is that if you were not around for the entirety of 2019, I think it's still going to be 8/52 of your 2019 net profit. There is a separate consideration for folks that were not around at all in 2019, and that is the guidance has not come out yet as to exactly how they handle that. But what I understand from talking to a banker is the way that they are handling that is if they look at the payroll costs that you paid January and to February 5th, well, basically in 2019. So, and you're going to be capped at that amount. Interest payments on mortgage obligations, rent on leases, utilities, again, all those had to be in place by February 15th. But the big key here again is the 75%. No more than 25% can be used for interest, rent, or utilities. Now, this is probably the most confusing portion, I think, of this act, and that is that the amount that can be forgiven can be reduced. Okay. And it will be reduced to the extent that you do not retain the same number of employees. If you compare the 8-week period to the period prior to getting the loan, and you have fewer employees and you have salary that you're paying that is significantly less, you may see the amount available for forgiveness reduced. And so if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. You've got the way they calculate the amount that you can borrow is based on your payroll costs prior to getting the loan. It's 2.5 times the payroll cost. And so they're wanting to ensure that the biggest focus of this whole thing is that you continue to employ people, even when perhaps you have no work for them to do. Okay. The goal here is to try and restore and preserve and protect their employees' paychecks. So to the extent you reduce the amount of employees you have or reduce the amount of employment, it's going to obviously reduce the amount that you have available to pay payroll. The amount of payroll you actually can pay. And so you're just going to be but even with that being the case, even if somehow you can come up with numbers that equal 75% of the loan you took out, you still can see a reduction in the amount of forgiveness based on how many employees you have during that 8-week period compared to the pre-loan period. So there's two ways that happens. One is there's a reduction based on a reduction in the number of employees that you have. So this amount is determined by, you have to take the loan amount, so let's say it's $100,000, okay? And you multiply it by a ratio. A ratio is, the ratio at the top part is the number of full-time equivalent employees that you had pre-loan period or post-loan period. And then you compare it to, I'm going the wrong way, sorry guys. Compare it to the amount of employees that you have in sorry, I went too far, during the 8-week period. So the 8-week period on the top, the bottom is the pre-loan period. Okay, and you're comparing that to January 1, the amount of employees you had January 1 to February 29th. Okay, and you base that on kind of a pay period. Okay, average. Okay, and compare it, or if you prefer, because you think you have either at your option, or if the SBA decides that you are a seasonal employer, you can look at the number of employees you had on a per period basis, February 15th, 2019 to January 30th, 2019, or June 30th. Sorry, that's a typo there. And so basically what you do is you take the number of employees you have per pay period in that pre-loan period, and you compare that to the number of employees that you had have per pay period during the 8-week period post-loan. Okay, that ratio, you multiply it by the loan amount, and that is what gets you to the amount of reduction. Now, the full-time equivalent employees, it's not, that term is not specified in CARES Act, but under other employment law provisions, we know how they typically do that. And that is basically you take the number of full-time employees and then add that to, you take the number of part-time employees, add all their hours up, divide them by 40, okay, during that pay period, and that gives you another number of full-time equivalent employees. Now, in addition to a forgiveness based on the number of employees you have, you also have a forgiveness based on the reduction in salary and wages. Okay, so essentially what it comes down to is you compare the salary and wages that you're paying per employee during the full fiscal quarter prior to getting the loan. Okay, the immediately ended full fiscal quarter. And then you compare that to what you're paying them during the 8-week period. And if there's a reduction of more than 25% per that employee, then you can see a dollar for dollar reduction in the amount of forgiveness. Okay. Now, one thing to keep in mind here is if the employee was paid more during the 8-week period rate, which is greater than 100,000, then you just exempt that from this calculation. Okay. So $100,000 plus employees, you don't have to worry about this. But to the extent that they're not paid $100,000 or more, then you would basically look at how much you're paying each employee. To the extent you reduce their wages more, this is their compensation, not the other non-cash benefits like health insurance and those things. To the extent you reduce their wages greater than 25% than what they were paid in the quarter prior, then there's a dollar for dollar reduction in the amount that is available to be forgiven. Again, there's a lot of details here yet to be figured out. A lot of guidance still to be given, but this is the statute language and kind of what we're working with. So there's still a lot to be unknown. Like for example, here's a little piece here too. The amount of eligible forgiveness is actually increased by the amount of additional wages you pay to employees who are tipped. So a lot of these folks who get tips are not getting any tips now. And so if you increase their pay to basically help them cover some of those tips, then that also will allow you to it's eligible for forgiveness as well. It just increases the amount. Again, we don't have a lot of guidance on this yet, nothing really other than what's in the CARES Act, but that's a good example of where we're hoping to get some more information.
So we stop right there for just
sure. Good.
So let's talk about this. Let's start with this one. Is the 8-week period a definite start when you receive the funds, or can you pick your 8-week time period prior to June 30th?
It is. The interim guidance has come out, says the date the loan is made. So it starts at that point. Okay. That's why a lot of folks have been trying to kind of time the date that they receive their loan proceeds to include maybe an extra pay period. So like if you pay your employees on Friday, get the loan on Thursday or that Friday, and include that in the amount that you're using the loan proceeds to pay.
Okay, next question is payroll accrued before loan funding but paid after loan closing able to be counted in forgiveness. Does that make sense?
Without any other guidance to the contrary, I would say yes.
Okay. You can use the money for interest on loans other than a mortgage.
No, it's interest on mortgages is what you can use it on. So if you have an unsecured loan that you're paying interest on, that would not be included. It has to be secured by a security interest in real estate or personal property.
Okay.
I think the concern there is that they're trying to avoid foreclosures.
Okay. Okay, so this is a question regarding contract workers and temporary workers. So it says, well, now I've lost it. Hang on. Sorry. Is it clear that contract workers do not qualify for payroll costs? However, how are temporary workers looked at? You have to count them as a full-time employee to see if you fell under or over 500. So is it clear where temporary workers fall?
It is not clear where temporary workers fall, but I would argue that the same rationale applies, that those costs should be included, because I understand they're coming from a different, I mean, if they're requiring you, if you're required to include them as in the number of employees determine eligibility, I have a hard time understanding why they would not include that. However, we will see. The definition of payroll costs absolutely does not include, the amount that you pay independent contractors. So, but a lot of, and I have heard also, it said that it wouldn't, if you have leased employees, that it wouldn't include, but I have a hard time understanding how temporary workers would not include. So right now it's unknown. For the strict language of the act, it makes you think that it isn't, but the rationale behind the act makes you think that they may be allowed. Ultimately, if you take that risk without guidance, you're in trouble. You could be in trouble if they decide otherwise. But a lot of folks, that's how they do it. So that's how they have a lot of temp employees. So we'll see. At this point, it's unknown.
Okay, so what if we cover health and life insurance at 100% for employees?
Health insurance definitely would be included for sure. And then but the employees, if employee was responsible for some portion, then that portion would not be added to their salary, because normally you take that out of their salary. But if you're 100%, the full amount of the premium is included. Our firm is that we pay 100%, so it would be fully included. On the life insurance proceeds, if you're paying again, there's nothing in there that says life insurance, so it's unknown at this particular point in time. I would say no, but there may be, again, a lot of the SBA is allowing the lenders to make a lot of these determinations on their own, and then they're coming back and issuing guidance. And so right now, if your lender is willing to let you do it, I would say it'd be great. But if you look at the actual evidence of what you're supposed to provide to support how much is to be forgiven, it does not say anything about those costs. It talks about insurance premiums.
So
health insurance premiums.
Basically what's included is what you need to follow, what just almost for word.
Yeah, if to play it safe, I think it's what you need to do.
Until we know more, I guess.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, so here's another question. We have several. So to be clear, employee federal withholding taxes are excluded from payroll costs.
So I've talked to a lot of folks about this, and the answer to that is, to the extent it is amounts that you are withholding for payment on behalf of the employee, such as the employee's, federal income tax withholdings, okay, or the employee's portion of the employment taxes. Those amounts are they're taken out of their wages. So their wages, they're not paid in addition to their wages. They're taken out of their wages. So it would be, you would include the wages without that reduction. Okay, so don't take your federal withholdings. You don't subtract that out of your payroll cost. You don't subtract out of the employee's portion of the employee taxes, payroll taxes, federal payroll taxes. You do subtract out of the employer's portion of the payroll taxes. Okay, so that's the unemployment, and unemployment is state done, so that's okay. But the Social Security portion, you cannot include the employer's portion of that.
Okay, next question. Can I increase my salary as an employee? I'm an officer of the company without penalty or non-forgiveness.
So the easy answer to that is you cannot pay yourself more than, you cannot include for yourself an amount in excess of the 15,000. Okay, plus I think the number was 15,000. Well, I just did something wrong. Hold on, I'll just go to it. It's 15,000 and 385 per employee. So that part's easy. However, whether you can increase it, to an amount closer to the 15,000 is actually unknown. We are still trying to. We don't have that guidance yet. I was on a call. Basically, it was an electronic board meeting for a local nonprofit just today, and we were asking the exact same question. And in this particular instance, there was actually a scheduled increase that we were kind of scheduled to make for someone that we had not, that board had decided to not pay yet because of some financial difficulties for the board, for the nonprofit. And so they made the determination that they were willing to take the risk on increasing the pay according to that particular scheduled pay increase. So in that particular instance, that's what they're doing. It's not going to go above the 15,385 for that individual employee. So you could argue that it would be okay, because but there is no guidance saying specifically. I have a feeling. I've kind of just been encouraging folks to be very conservative on those things, because I could see guidance coming out that says that you're not allowed to just bump people's pay up to 75%. And I think the optics look poor if perhaps you're the president of the company and you're bumping your pay up to, and not everybody else's. So that's a potential issue. It could be that you're underpaid. You've based on revenues, you've had a kind of suppressed salary or whatever it is. And so, maybe it's okay. Again, we just do not know at this point. That's one of the biggest questions folks have is how much can I accelerate the payment of salary? So like, can I pay the July salary during June, or, those are questions we do not know at this point, because there is no specific guidance being given yet.
So on all of these, I don't know responses. Are we just supposed to wait and hopefully there'll be some guidelines, Chris, that get pushed
That's
down?
our hope. Yeah, they're promising additional guidelines, and my guess is they should be coming rather quickly, because their people have loan proceeds and they need to use them, and they need to make sure they use them in a way that enables them to forgive. If there's any question, you may want to hold off for a little while before paying it, until we get the guidance. And that certainly wouldn't. That's kind of what I'm suggesting right now is don't go. Be conservative until is kind of what my suggestion is. You can always take those loan proceeds, kind of park them, for the next 5 or 6 weeks until hopefully we get more information.
Okay, Chris, we've got 10 other questions. You ready for those?
Sure.
Okay. If you can prove that the reason the employee number reduced is because employee quit or was fired for cause, will this factor in? And also, if employees called in sick during period and they are not eligible for sick pay.
So if they're still your employee, okay, and they just called in sick. They're just taking, or maybe even you've put them on furlough. Okay, which furlough is a term that is not really in employment law vernacular, but it's been commonly used to indicate an employee that has been basically they're not working and not being paid because they're not working, but they're still on the list of employees that you have, with the idea is once things improve, you'll bring them back. Can contrast that to a layoff where there's a complete separation of employment with no concept of bringing anyone back. Okay. Furloughed employees, generally speaking, have, there's some question about whether they're eligible for unemployment or not if they're still considered employees of the employer. And so in this particular instance, but they made it very clear in the CARES Act that those folks are indeed eligible for unemployment, and even though they're still considered an employee. A lot of folks are what they've done is they've brought their employee, they keep their employees on, even pay their benefits even during that time period, so they don't lose their health insurance, etc. And so those people would still be considered employees for purposes of determining forgiveness. So now, as respects just any reduction other than for reasons of COVID-19 purposes, the Act does not specify why they are no longer your employee. So at present, I would consider that number, you'd have to count that number, include them in your calculation of your employee reduction, basically.
Okay. On loan forgiveness, if we have an employee take voluntary unpaid leave for part of this 8-week period, which was the employee's idea, how is that treated for forgiveness purposes?
If they're just on leave and they're still your employee, I think they're considered your employee, but you're going to get dinged on the amount of you pay that person. So if you're not paying them anything, then you compare that to what they were being paid before. They stopped getting, before the 8-week period, then you're going to see a reduction in your loan forgiveness based on the amount of salary you're paying each employee, that category of reduction.
Okay. What about a car lease, Chris?
So car leases are technically speaking, that would not be included. So on your mortgage payment, the one thing I would just distinguish between it's the mortgage interest payments that are allowable to be paid. Any principal or prepayment of principal or anything like that, any money going towards principal would not be included. And so a lease payment is not considered a mortgage, it's a lease. So I think you're probably dinged there. Even if you could argue that some leases are basically financial leases, and they really kind of, the lease payment corresponds with a portion of interest and a portion of principal. But because the Act does not say leases, I would definitely not include that in your loan, or expect that in your loan forgiveness calculations.
Okay, this is regarding severance cost. I read that severance costs can be included in the forgiveness amount
Right.
under
Yeah.
payroll costs as well, understanding that depending on timing, this may impact your calculation for forgiveness.
As long as it's paid in the 8-week period, you're going to be able to include it in your loan forgiveness. The one thing I would say is just one of the strategies to try and maximize your loan forgiveness is a lot of folks have laid people off, right? And so if those folks remain laid off, they're going to have the amount forgiveness reduced to the extent they don't bring those people back on. That's really kind of the point of this. And so what most of my clients are doing is, whenever they kind of line it up with their loan proceeds, and as soon as they get their loan proceeds, they bring these people back online, basically, and they will rehire them and pay them for that 8-week period, even if they don't have a lot of stuff for them to do. So that's what a lot of folks have done to make sure that they hit that 75% of their employment costs, and that they don't receive their payroll costs. So just to hit that number, first off, right? And then secondly, to reduce the amount of any reduction, to eliminate any reduction based on number of employees and your wage amounts. So that if you look at this last thing, restore the employment as best you can, just before the loan or right on the day of the loan, that's the best strategy really. And that's really the purpose for the Paycheck Protection Program, is to get you to rehire folks for 8 weeks with the hope that in 8 weeks things will settle out a little bit and we'll have, hopefully you can keep them on. To the extent you don't, they can apply for unemployment again.
Okay, here's a little bit of a long one, but our banker of let me start all over. Our big banker for our 14 employee clinic was slow to get into the game. So they went instead with a smaller community bank that was accepting PPP applications without requiring an account with them. Last Thursday, they got an email from the lender that says your application has been accepted by the SBA and a PLP reservation number had been issued. This means funds have been reserved for you. We also got a PLP number in that email. But now we are getting the runaround from the smaller community bank regarding any next steps. We are worried because the lender site indicates the lender has 10 days from the approval to fund the loan, and we are now on day 7. Since lender notified us last Thursday, will we lose our PPP money if the small community bank can't get it together before the 10-day period ends?
I know you will not lose your reservation number. I think that the lender may get into haven't run into some issues with the SBA. So I have been, there's a lot of question on the 10 days, by the way. Most people expect that to be extended. 10 days has been a challenge because most of the banks, the SBA did not give anyone a form to use that really applies to the PPP loan. They gave them some language to put in a SBA form note. And so there's been some issues making that work with the various loan documentation generating softwares that are out there. It's just for banks to be able to gear up to actually be able to fund. It's just taking some time. There are some, I think at this point, you're probably stuck with that community bank because if you tried to apply anywhere else, you have to attest that there is no application pending anywhere else. It's part of the certification. And so and what happens is if the new bank tried to put it in, it would get kicked out because the SBA portal basically tracks it. Okay. And it would not be permitted. So you're really in a situation now where they've got to fund. But my guess is you're probably counting 10 days, and maybe you can clarify this, but 10 days from date of loan versus 10 business days. Most people are saying, well, surely that's at least 10 business days, which, that extends it another, at least, 4 days. So you may just be halfway into that at this point. We were approved, our firm also, ran into some issues associated with whether we needed, we had to basically shut our office down. And so we had to apply, and we got approved last Monday, and we still have not gotten our proceeds yet.
Okay, thank you. Still have about 10 more questions to go. I'm going to stop there for a minute. Chris, how many more slides did you have for today?
I mean, really, this is fine. This is essentially the last slide. There's some information about what you need how you applied for forgiveness and that kind of stuff. But that's your banker is going to walk you through that pretty carefully. What you're supposed to the evidence that you're supposed to give, but you've got it in here. So questions are probably the most important thing. So let's just stick with that.
Okay. Say our lender allows a certain expense to be included in payroll cost, but later is disallowed. Is there an audit period that we would be under that would require us to pay back amounts that were initially forgiven, but decided later needed to be paid back?
I don't know what SBA's audit requirements are. So I can't really answer that. I'll have to see if I can find out some information in that regard. Let me take a note here real quick. But my guess, again, if there's any question, as to whether that's included or not, you might want to just hold on to those proceeds. It's what I'm suggesting to people to do right now until additional guidance is given. If I think that the issue here, though, I think that the SBA is not going to nitpick us on this stuff too much. If, like, for example, they allowed you to include disability insurance, just hold on to that portion, and don't use it for that purpose right now. And just, it's for, it's 2.5 times your payroll cost, whatever portion of that is attributable to that payroll, your disability insurance, hold on to it. Just don't use it for any purpose. Keep it in the bank account for a time being. So if we get additional guidance in the meantime, you can use that to pay it back. It's probably not a huge amount anyway. Whatever these costs, the amounts you're putting in, there's probably not going to be a huge amount anyway. And worst case scenario, just means you got to pay it back at the end of the 2 years. So it's again, I don't think they're going to ding us pretty heavily. Ultimately, what will happen is when they're required to submit, the banker is required to submit information to the SBA for forgiveness. And at that point, the SBA is going to make a determination. And so at that point, you'll know how much money there is to pay back. And you just have to make provision for it.
Okay. If an owner is drawing a regular salary and given a W-2, is that portion of compensation treated differently than the 852 of Schedule C earnings?
It's not true. It's basically the combination of the two. And so, hold on, let me take it back. So that are you? I guess the question is, and I'm not a tax guy, so, but the question basically, what you're going to be capped at the 100,000 in wages, cash wages. Okay, so that we know that part. The W-2 wages is what you look at, primarily. Anything that's a distribution on your stock is not going to be included, I do not think. And so if you're getting W-2 as an employee, that's probably the number they're going to include. It's possible that they could also include the Schedule C net profit, but I just haven't seen that one yet. That's another one I need to probably check into.
So these couple of questions that you're checking into, Chris, can the folks reach out directly to you after this?
If you wouldn't mind, just email me that, guys. That'd be easier than me trying to take notes right now.
Okay.
That first slide, and we'll make sure that we just email that out, put that in the chat too. I'll do it right now.
Okay. So next question is, but that 15,385 is for full 8-week period. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. Is the 75% figure based on the full amount of your loan, or is it based on the amount of the loan funds used?
Repeat that for me again.
So is the 75% figure based on the full amount of your loan, or is it based on the amount of loan funds used?
Full amount of your loan.
Okay. What happens if employee would rather stay on unemployment? Great question.
Yeah, that's one of the things that a lot of our clients are complaining about. They're thinking if things pick back up, that these stay-at-home orders get relaxed. The question then is, what do you do with you're trying to hire back your employees and they're making more money on unemployment? And so that's a genuine issue. I think that most are probably going to realize that their unemployment proceeds are going to end at a certain point, and it will probably behoove them to actually come back to work so that they don't have to worry about those wages ending. So I think in the end that's probably going to end up being more figurative of a question than it actually ends up being something of substance.
Okay, if we see we are coming up short in week 6 or 7, can we simply bonus the employees to make the 75% work?
Again, that's some information we don't know yet. By that time, I bet we'll know it. Okay. And so, and again, I think to the extent that you can, reasonably justify that, anything that you pay in extra to what their typical wages would be. I think you're probably going to be okay. And if you look at if you look at the purposes of the act, um, it's to get money in the hands of employees. They'd rather not get that money paid back. They'd rather go to employees. I think in the end, you're probably going to find that's stuff that they don't mind too much about. But I would hold on to it as long as you could to see if there's any guidance in the meantime.
Can we back pay employees that took voluntary furlough before we received the funds and entered into the 8-week period?
I would say certainly, yeah.
So for my clarity, the only federal payroll tax forgivable is employer Social Security / Medicare portion.
The portion that's not forgiven is the employer's portion of the Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid.
Let me read it again. The only federal payroll tax forgivable is employer Social Security / Medicare portion. Question.
No, it's that is the opposite. It is not forgivable. It is the employee's portion that comes out of their paycheck. You could basically, gross that up so you don't reduce their wages by that amount. The amount that the only employment taxes that are forgivable are state and local based employment taxes.
Okay. How concerned are you regarding today's SBA guidance regarding PPP loan recipients having other sources of liquidity to support ongoing operations, while supposedly targeted at public companies? Seems like it could apply to a lot of other small businesses.
I just saw some of that guidance today. I do not think that I've really digested all of it. And so if you can email me that directly and point me to the provision, I would be happy to answer that in a separate email.
I guess that's all like where the larger companies got funding and probably shouldn't. Is that where all that's driving from, you think, Chris?
Well, I think they're talking about, so there's I don't know. It depends on, maybe you can even find that person to unmute them real quick and see if they can give some additional information. But I know that the additional guidance was about the secondary market and be able to package and sell these loans on the market and get liquidity. And so that may be, it may just be that. Can you find that person?
Yes.
Because that would be helpful for all of us.
Give me a minute. Hey, Brian. Not sure how to unmute him right now. I tell you what, until I figure it out, keep going. And what I may do is if I could get Brian Ford and a couple of other ones. Brian, can you hear me? And can you say something? Okay.
Can you unmute yourself, Brian? Guess not.
Brian? Guess not.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly to what he's referring.
Okay.
I'm looking at the newest guidance right now to see if I can find anything that he might be referring to. I know there was some language in 3 here that dealt with liquidity of the banks, but
he says it was the last question, 31 on the SBA. Yeah, that came out today.
Okay, yeah. I looked at the FAQs that were published, so I may not have seen it. So if you mind just shoot me a link to that, that'd be great, Brian.
And Chris Hurley has another question.
Sure.
How does the 10,000 grand from the SBA for the economic injury disaster factor into this?
It's basically taken off of the amount forgiven. It's considered it's basically considered, it's not, hold on, let me just pull it up here real quick because I got a little bit confused on that one. Hold on. Actually, I think it's on the guidance, interim guidance here. Hold on. My understanding is it does not have any impact. It's not like it does not have any impact on the amount that to be forgiven. I do not believe. Let's see. Actually, they don't have the calculations in here. Yeah, that's right. They don't have that. Guys, there's a statement in the CARES Act itself, and I just need to look at it again because I haven't looked at that piece in a little bit. That talks about that $10,000 loan. I've got it on here. Hold on. I may have to get back to you on that one too, but I do. There is a provision here that discusses that.
So you can get back with Chris
Sure.
Hurley on that one, correct?
Yeah, if you can just make sure I just get the list of all these things and who to get back to.
Okay, and then
You guys
Brian,
can if I don't get to it, if I say that, just email me directly. I put the email in the chat, my email address on there. So feel free to just email me directly. But go ahead.
that was it.
Okay, good. Well, sorry guys, I need to. I will definitely get back to you on any questions you have. If you will just email me directly at ctrump@emlaw.com. And I will get clarification on that $10,000. And I will also look at the new FAQ.
So, did you have more, Chris?
That's it. That should do it. It's fine.
This is crazy. I mean, I applaud the government for moving so quick on this.
Chaotic.
The ripple effect of all the things and all the questions and what's included, what's not included. It's just mind boggling,
It is a challenge, and there's so many different pieces of information that are coming out of all these at different times, and just assimilating it all can be pretty challenging. So, again, sometimes you just have to sit down with all the different pieces and just run through them all with your questions and make sure they're not covered. Because like you'll have 3 different, sets of guidance covering the same topic in some form or fashion. And so,
right.
very challenging.
One last thing. Someone has how do you get the SBA fax? What's the link to that?
The SBA fax number?
FAQs, yes.
FAQ. Okay, yeah. So I will post in the chat room real quick the link to that. Okay, but basically,
And while you're doing that, Chris, I do see here that folks would like to get your PowerPoint, so we'll try to get that out. And just so you know, this conversation, this presentation is recorded. We'll send it out tomorrow in the Blunt Chambers daily email. Hopefully you've gotten an email from us daily for the last 25 days, and tomorrow will not be any different. So you'll get the whole recording there. And so Chris, did you send that? Did you type that in?
I just typed it in.
Okay.
Wait, I just sent it to one person. Looks like I meant to send to everyone. Here, hold on.
Yeah, if you don't mind, please. There you go.
Oh.
There you go.
And
okay.
Cassie, I apologize. I was somehow I selected to text just you on there, whoever Cassie.
So if you have questions, some of the things that we couldn't answer today, which was a lot, but we think they're coming out, but the other specific questions from Chris Hurley, Brian Ford, there may have been Sue Clark in there. I can't remember. Email him, email Chris directly. Thank you, Chris.
My pleasure.
I'm clapping. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thanks guys for the opportunity. I appreciate it. And again, just email me directly with any questions you guys have. I'm happy to answer them. If it's always helpful for to hear other people's perspectives and see the the way they're looking at it. So really appreciate your time, and again, let me know for anything.
See you all. Hey Chris, can you hang back with me for just a minute?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So what that points out to me is there's more.
Yeah, there's more coming.
There's more, yeah.
Even the stuff most recently issued, there was again promise for more guidance. So, but they've kind of at this point they've focused primarily on the things necessary to get the loans made,
Right.
and so that's been the focus really from a rulemaking perspective. And if you look at the latest guidance on that, it talks about it just even says specifically additional guidance on loan forgiveness will be forthcoming.
So if you want to come back whenever and do a next round, happy to do that.
Yeah.
Just let me know. You're following it. I mean, I'm following it close, but you're following it closer.
Yeah, happy to.
Whoever reaches out, those questions that you couldn't answer. And now, can you email me that PowerPoint?
Yeah, I will. I'll email it to you.
And I'll get that
I saw a couple of typos, so I'll probably make those typo changes this afternoon and send it to you.
Okay, sounds good. What do you need from us, Chris?
That's it. I'm good.
Okay, well, great session.
Excellent. Well, we'll see what we can. Hopefully, we'll get some more guidance and can help people out further as things get fleshed out. So,
thank you.
thanks a lot.
All right, bye.